Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Well, there's always a limit, and patience has a limit. I wondered from time to time, when will the Russians reach their limit? And I saw that in the war in Ukraine. People think that the Russians just acted from an impulse of trying to gain other people's territories just because they have an imperialistic worldview mindset. But if you look at it, the Russians held back for about 30 years. And in all these 30 years, the West, the United States of America in this case, and the West are just the jackals that follow, pushed and pushed and pushed, advanced and advanced. And the Russians, because of their weakness, especially in the 1990s, retreated and retreated and retreated. In 2000, Putin became the president and things changed. He restructured a lot of things, including the military, because he saw the trend. And he started arming and getting more sophisticated, not in quantity, but in quality. Because he knew everything will get probably to a Ukraine scenario. He was warned in 2008 by NATO, by, if you remember, George W. Bush, a NATO summit in Bucharest in 2008, who claimed in front of everyone that one day Georgia and Ukraine will join NATO, which was a no-no because according to the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, Ukraine was supposed to be neutral. So Putin was like, what are you talking about? So again, they didn't react. He reacted verbally and he trained, he practiced, he got better. In quality, mostly. So what we see right now in Ukraine is where the Russians said, this is it. This is it. As Putin said many times, you are on our porch. We can't go back anymore unless we go into the Bering Strait, right there, across from the whole continent. In this case, the Russians reached their limit, or the limit, with the Western Europe. And they tell the guys in the Western Europe, we reached our limit in Ukraine and we intervened militarily. We will nuke you if you conventionally or attack us or aggress us, even with conventional weapons. I have here 4 articles, and I will go chronologically in a certain way, where the Russians tell the Western Europeans, what you're doing is going to lead to us using nuclear weapons on you. All right, let's start with the first article. This is an article from the 24th of April. NATO forces in Ukraine could trigger World War III, Russian security chief. I covered this, I think, yesterday. But nevertheless, that's not the main thing. He warned Shoigu that if, remember here, the idea of positioning a peacekeeping force in Ukraine is just a cover for the true objectives of establishing control over Ukraine. So he said, as I said, it's obvious for, I think, normal people, I would say, NATO peacekeeping troops in Ukraine is actually a capitulation of Russia losing the war, because that's the main point why, the reason why they invaded over there, including defending their ethnic Russians in Ukraine, Ukrainians of Russian ethnicity. Why ethnicity? Because they belong to the Russian tribe, not to the Ukrainian tribe, if we go genetically. Oh, but some people may claim that actually the Ukrainians are genetically Russians, just Polishified or something, turned into whatever. I'm not going to go into that. So he says, this is how it started. If you think that you can bring troops, peacekeeping troops, in Ukraine as love-making troops, that's going to be just a trampoline for you to attack us, and we will not accept that. Now, Next one. This is from the 24th again. Western aggression could trigger a Russian nuclear response. Now again, Sergei Shoigu has warned. And we have here European warmongers working to undermine Trump's peace efforts, Russian intel. And then Europe is shifting from supplying weapons to Ukraine to funding its defense industries. So they're arming, making sure that they have, funds so they can build weapons in order to have these guys at it, and in any case to have some peacekeepers in Ukraine. And let's see what this article actually reveals. Moscow is closely monitoring the EU's militarization program, Sergei Shoigu said. Moscow reserves the right to launch a nuclear strike in response to Western military aggression. Now, what's an aggression? That depends on what the Russians will consider an aggression. Sergei Shoigu, Secretary of Russian National Security Council, has warned, citing last year's amendments to the country's nuclear doctrine. The warning comes amid discussions in Western Europe about possible deployment of troops to Ukraine as part of a potential peace deal. As well, the EU's plan to remilitarize the bloc. According to the Russian security chief, Moscow is, and I'm quoting, closely monitoring the military preparation of the European Union countries. Nuclear weapons may be used, now listen to this, in the event of an aggression against Russia or Belarus, even in response to attacks with conventional weapons, Shoigu said in an interview with TASS on Thursday. He also noted calls by France and UK for troops deployment to Ukraine following a possible ceasefire. So you can't do that. Moscow has repeatedly warned against such steps, saying that unauthorized by them, military personnel in Ukraine would be regarded as legitimate targets. Shoigu reiterated to TASS that the presence of foreign troops in Ukraine could provoke a direct confrontation between Russia and NATO, potentially escalating into a nuclear war. Now Moscow updated its nuclear doctrine, if you remember, last November, and they said even if these guys hit us, we're gonna hit them with conventional weapons. We can do it. Alright, so what do you think would be? Russian President Vladimir Putin expressed a list of conditions that could trigger a nuclear response. These include scenarios where aggression by a non-nuclear state or group of states, Poland, let's name it, supported by a nuclear state, US or Great Britain, could be viewed as a joint attack. So if Poland does something, and that's why the Poles are kind of like quiet lately, we can't do it. Ukrainian forces have since conducted multiple long-range strikes deep into Russian territory using Western-supplied arms. There's the same thing. So the Russians offer a blank check to themselves. You see, Ukraine also falls under the joint attack. Because right here, scenario where aggression by a non-nuclear state, Ukraine, or group of states, let's put Poland to the side for now, supported by a nuclear state, Great Britain is a nuclear state, gave Storm Shadow missiles and Scalp missiles from France, which is another nuclear state, or HIMARS or F-16s and all that from United States of America are nuclear states, could be viewed as a joint attack. So they offer themselves, based on that doctrine, a blank check to strike whomever they want in the West. The nuclear doctrine, however, describes nuclear weapons as an extreme and forced measure and stresses Moscow's goal to prevent tensions. You got it? And here, despite the ongoing peace process, the Ukraine conflict mediated by Trump, the EU has pledged to continue to provide weapons to Kiev and has taken steps to militarize itself, including by approving the 800 billion euros, $910 billion Rearm Europe plan, together with the warmongers and with the supplying the weapons to Ukraine to funding its defense industries, not making weapons, and then sell them. So, the Russians, this is what I got to know, not to know, it was another confirmation that the Russians are like this, consistent, as I always say, consistent in good or evil. That is, if they tell you they're going to give you $1, they're going to give you $1. If they say they're gonna smack you, they will smack you. Good or evil, they will be consistent. The Russians told these guys, back off, NATO, back off, back off. But Russia was not strong enough at that point. And it lets things go so close to Ukraine. Why? It's easier to fight closer than further. Remember, the line of supplies are a very important aspect in a war. Take for example, Napoleon's invasion of Russia. It overstretched the line of supplies. The Russians were burning, oops, what the hell, meow meow, my cat. The Russians burned their territory while retreating, and the guys could not find food. Water poisoning their wells and all that. So they couldn't find food and whatever. So the line of supply was overextended. They could not, and an army does not, does not run on an empty stomach. They have to feed the guys. So my friends here, the Russians, main point, tell these guys, back off. I'm already hurt. You use your weapons in Ukraine, using the Ukrainians to hit targets inside Russia, in Kursk and Belgorod, Bryansk and many other in Russia with your weapons. No, that's not right. It is right. I'm going to give you one example. Remember the Belgorod IL-76 transport plane that was over Russia, hit by a HIMARS missile. That's only one example. That was over Russia. And there were those, the POWs, the Ukrainians, now they just recognize, yes, it was us. That was over Russia. That was a Russian plane. That's a declaration of war, according to the doctrine that falls under the Russian doctrine. So they already offered them. They are ready. Don't mess around, because, as it seems, the United States of America has a standoffish attitude. And he's going to come and reconstruct you after a nuclear strike by Russia. Don't be, or be okay with that. How should I put it? Relax. If the Russians are going to hit you and you're going to seize, we're going to shut the fuck up, then the American industries and international banking system will come and reconstruct you again. And they will take over you again, all the way. Not only, 90%, as I think the situation is right now. Remember, those are the global interests that use powers, not baboons like Romania. These are just throw them into the fight for their interest, using as a threat big countries. So they, let's say, harness the United States of America. Americans tell the Poles, small country compared with the United States of America, go and do something to the Russians, and we're going to fight the interests through the Americans, through the Poles. We're going to get, the Russian interest. The Russian energy, we're going to take their military, we're going to do whatever we want. Through the Poles and through the occupation, political and military occupation of the Americans of Poland. If you think Poland is sovereign, forget about it. Anyway, here it is, my friends. Don't play with the Russians. I think they're at the end of the line. And this is a clear warning to the exact guys who supply weapons to Ukraine, militarize, and the Russians don't like it. We'll see what happens to NATO. I'm 80% certain that the Russians, after they do what they do in Ukraine, they will demand NATO to back the fuck off, or a structure. I think they already have the plan to create a structure for NATO not be NATO, or NATO not be in Romania or Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, Baltic states, Finland, and something like. No, this is going to be something else. I think they're going to go to the next one. If that peace process ends in Ukraine and is going to be successful, that is, from the Russian perspective, I think that's what's going to be the end of it. It's going to have its sphere of influence over Ukraine 100%. The Americans will get something that the Russians allow them through their negotiations, and then they will go into NATO. Something must change. Russia is on a position to fire. At Europe, at least. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.